I'm going to show you the filter function. So it works in a similar way to the filter command, which is on the Home tab here. So if I wanted just to filter by February, I've got all of February's results, and that's what filter can do. It is a bit more flexible as well, where you could do and or with it to specify two different things. I'm just going to go ahead and start. I've already set up a data validation. I have a separate video on this where I just have my drop down list here, and I've just used these. Normally in real life I would have had these on a different tab so you couldn't see them on this page, but I've just used these, and if I just go in here you can see what I did. Data validation, I chose list, and then I just selected that range. So that's my list in there, and the same for here. It's these two here. I'm just going to show you a simple filter first without using this. So my data is every month of the year. So I've just got January, it's in alphabetical order here, just 1 year's worth of data, and it's just two categories, just so we haven't got too much data to work with, just the hardware and the IT, and all the part numbers and part descriptors in that range, and a total, let's just say the sales figures for that month for that part. So let's just go ahead with the filter equals filter, open bracket, array. Array is the range, and the next part of the syntax is how we're going to filter that down. So the array is just all of our data. I've got all the same headers copied over here, so I'm going to bring in all of this data, but then specify how I want that filtered. In this example, I'm just going to filter it by the month. I put my cursor in there, Control Shift arrow right and arrow down to select the whole range. There's over 5,000 rows of data there. I don't need to absolute reference this. This is an array function, so my actual result just returns to that one cell. I'm not dragging it down or across. You'll see when I've finished. So my array is my whole data set, not including the headers, comma, include. So this is how I'm filtering it. I'm just going to specify 1 month at the moment. I'm going to say I want to return all the data for April. So my include is my month. So all my months here, Control Shift arrow down. So it's the same length as my data range, rows 4 to 5523, 4 to 5523. So where my month, this red here, equals, I'm still in my include, equals, here I'm just actually going to type the word in quotation marks. Let's put April, close bracket. So now we've got all of April's sales figures. So it's returning the whole data set, but only for the month of April. So just scroll down here, all the hardware, and then the IT there at the bottom. So I've manually written it there. It's not very helpful. You can obviously just put the word in a cell, April. So in my formula, rather than manually typing it, I can reference that cell with my month in it. So let's just delete that and refer to that instead. And then I could change that to May. And it's bringing me all of May's data. That's why I've done the data validation. So I'm going to actually refer to this cell instead. Then I can just make my selection so I can keep changing what I'm looking at. Go back to our formula here. And rather than this here, I'm just going to drag that up and we're going to refer to that cell instead. So now it should be January. Let's delete that. And now I can toggle through and I've got my filtered list there. So rather than picking my months here, I've got this here. That's a very basic example. And for this example, there's probably not much benefit doing it this way than actually just filtering it here. So you can add other elements. So here, that's my month filter. I might also want to filter the category. So I might want to look at each month, either by hardware or IT. In my include, do the same as this, but rather than my month range, I select my category range. And rather than this month here, this cell here, I select this cell here. So I just need to add that in. I do actually need to write it in a certain way. It might seem a bit confusing, but once you get the hang of it and you know that's how it's written, or you can always refer back to this video to see the syntax and how I've written it, then hopefully it'll make sense. And the way this formula is written is also the same for another function called sum product. They work in a similar way. So rather than add a comma, because if I add a comma, I'm then out of my include, I need to actually add an asterisk. Asterisk is our and. So to add other elements, we need either an and or an or. And is the asterisk, or is the plus sign. It's a little bit confusing because you might think the plus sign is an and, as in plus, but you just need to remember it. Asterisk is the and, plus sign is the or, and it will make more sense once I've shown you the examples. This is our first one, and then to narrow it down further, we're adding our next one. So that's where the category, Control-Shift arrow down, equals this cell here. And again, we don't need to do any cell referencing. What I do need to do though, this isn't going to work at the moment. I need to put my different statements here in their own brackets. So here I need to add a bracket here, and put this one in its own brackets as well. So my first one is in brackets here. That's the month range equals this cell here. And my second one is my category range and that category in that cell there. Enter. So the reason we don't need to absolute reference this is because my filter function is in this one cell. If you look up here and I click on another cell in this range, it's grayed out. It's returning the answer to this cell here and it's spilling it into this range here. Because that's a selection, it's 5 columns long and however many rows, it's just spilling the result across here. You can see it's in a blue box. And as I scroll down, you can see it's only the hardware because that was one of the filters, April and hardware. So I don't have my IT in there anymore. If I change this to IT, there we go. And I can change the month. So that becomes a bit more useful. And just to show you the other example of OR, the OR probably might not make sense in this scenario. It's probably not a result you'd want to see, but let me just show it to you. So rather than the asterisk for and, so month and category, so July and IT, we're going to say that it needs to match July or IT. So I change my asterisk to a plus sign. So what you've got here is all your IT, no matter what month, because it's OR. And then for July, it should be that you've got hardware and IT because it's saying all. So all of July's results plus all of IT's results. So every month for IT, and then in July, you get everything. You can keep adding to this. You might have lots of fields and you can keep narrowing it down. So here I could say also where, I've run out of my drop down, so I'm just going to manually type something in. So you could say also where the part description equals cap. I need to get my spelling correct. I'm just picking this first one here. Cap screws. End quotation. I need to put the whole thing in brackets. So it needs to either be July or IT or cap screws. So we're going to get a random mix here. We're going to get July, every month with IT, and it should be one line of this hardware for every month as well. Okay, so you've got your cap screws, all your IT, your cap screws. Then when we scroll down to July, it should be everything, all the hardware and IT. And then back to our one line of cap screws, all our IT, one line of cap screws. So you might want to play around with that just to understand how that works. It's not going to work if I change these to and. Cap screws isn't in the IT category. Let's just change those pluses to asterisks for and. So you're going to get, when you use and, you're really narrowing down the results. It's not going to work. If I were to pick something that is in the IT range, I think printers is one of them. There we go. July, IT category printer. It's very specific when you're using and. Let's just go back to our original example. So just where it's month and category. I might not want to return all of this data, depending on what options I've got up here, how I'm filtering it. I probably don't want to see the category. It's not really adding much. I've already chosen the category here. As we've seen in some of the examples, we do get a mixture of results sometimes, depending on what we picked, and if we're using and or. I'm going to keep the month, although for this example, it is the same each time. But I think because I've only got hardware and IT, and the part number here has either IT or HW in front of it, I don't really want this, but how would I miss out this category when I'm selecting this whole range here? This is where we use the function choose. I haven't done a video on choose yet, but by the time you watch this, I might have done it. It's not something I use very often, but it works in this scenario. Choose is a little bit like if. There's also one called switch as well, but I don't use them very often. Well, I certainly don't use switch. Choose I very occasionally use. Instead of our array, so this was our array. This is where we selected the whole data set, A4, so this cell here, to E, and then all the way to the bottom. That's row 5523. So our blue, you can't see it because I've got some of these other ones on top of it, but that's all blue down to here. That's our array. That's our whole data set. I can change this data set so it's not returning everything. First of all, I'm just going to remove this header here. I don't want the category anymore. So I'm going to overtype it with these two, and I'm going to then I'm going to delete this. I'm going to start again. Equals filter. Our array, we need to start typing our choose function now. Choose. It's asking for an index number. I've got 4 columns. So my index number, and I need to actually write this in its own brackets, because once I start using commas, it's going to then move on to the next value there, that value there. That's not what I want. I want everything I'm writing now just to be in that first part of the syntax, in the index number. So in my curly brackets, 1, 2, 3, 4, close brackets. Now when I write my comma, it's asking for the values, value 1, 2, 3. So I need to do value 1, 2, 3, 4. What I'm doing here, I'm choosing which columns I'm assigning to each of those index numbers. So let's just go ahead and do it. Then at the end, we can go back and look at it. So my value 1, my column 1 is my month, Control Shift arrow down, comma. And now my value 2, that's my SKU, that's here, Control Shift arrow down, comma. My value 3 is my part description, so I'm skipping the category. This is my value 3, what I'm assigning to the third column, Control Shift arrow down, comma. Value 4, that's my total. So I'm assigning this to the last column, column 4. Control Shift arrow down, close bracket. That's my array, comma. So now I move on to my include. So I've chosen my array, and include is the month, Control Shift arrow down, equals whichever month selected here, asterisk, category, Control Shift arrow down, equals whichever is selected in this cell here. I just need to put my brackets around each of those. So it might take you a while to get the hang of the brackets. If you get errors, it's probably because you've done your brackets or commas incorrectly. So that should be it with one more bracket at the end, just to close the whole thing. Enter. So now we have these and we don't have our category anymore. We didn't have to select that whole range. So if I go in here, what it's saying is to column number 1, I've assigned this blue, that's the month. For index number 2, column 2, that's our SKU. For 3, I've assigned this, the part description, and for 4, I've assigned the total. I could have done it in another order. I didn't necessarily have to pick it in sequential order like I've done here. I could say we'd have our total in column 3, then our part description. So let's just escape out of that and swap them over. So I need to change the order there. So let's just remove those last 2. So for my value 3, that's now going to be our total. So it's here, Control Shift arrow down, comma, and for our value 4 is our part description, as that's now our 4th column. Control Shift arrow down and press enter. So now we have it in that order. And just to show you one more thing, I could wrap this whole thing in a sort. So I can sort this in part description alphabetical order. So all I need to do is start at the beginning here, sort, open brackets, comma. So I'm back in my sort index. That's going to be my 4th column. I want to sort it in part description order 4, comma, ascending, enter. These are now in alphabetical order. So the whole thing's sorted in the part description alphabetical order. And just one more thing I wanted to show you. It's called transpose. I'm just going to show you it here. I'm not going to do a whole video on its own. It's not that useful, but it kind of does tie in with sort and filter. It's transpose. Transpose is where you switch your rows and columns. I'm just going to do it on this rather than this data set, just so we haven't got too much data to look at. I can say equals transpose this range here. That's all it is, enter. So now I've got my month and category, so my headers rather than columns are now in rows, and I've got my months here, month and category. So it's just the other way around. You do have the copy and paste option. So I could highlight this, Control C to copy, home, paste. This one with the 2 arrows there is your transpose. So I'm just going to put my cursor in here, paste, transpose. The only problem with this is it's not dynamic. I've just pasted static values there. If I change this month to March, it updates there, and obviously also down here. But this stays as July. I just copied and pasted that data. This is dynamic. This is the original. So I just thought I'd quickly mention those in case they're useful. If you haven't already seen it, I do have a video on the sort and filter using these commands here. You've got sort and filter, and then over here you've got advanced filter, and there's also custom sort and custom lists. There is also a video on take, the take function, which is similar to this. So you might want to just look at that and see where you might use filter and where you might use take.